Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Theresa May continues her tour of the continent as she tries to save her agreement. Here with me is the Deputy Editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater, and the Editor of Politics.co.uk, Ian Dunt. Hello to you gentlemen both.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. Your thoughts, first of all, on what the Prime Minister might be able to come back with?
Well, it's quite clear that the EU are not willing to reopen the actual text of the withdrawal agreement. What she might be able to wring out of them is some kind of clarification, effectively no change to the legal text, but something which might provide MPs who don't want to back the deal on the basis of the backstop a bit of cover, some kind of non-legally binding reassurance that it might not last that long. But considering how high tensions are running,
What would that have to look like for her to be able to get it through the House of Commons?
I don't think really anything that they could give her at this point, or they would be prepared to give her at this point, would help her get through the House of Commons. But what I think she's likely to come back with would be something giving some sort of non-legal suggestion that the backstop might not be expected to last for very long, for instance. But I think in the grand scheme of things right now, it's not really going to be enough.
Yeah, that's right, and it's not going to be enough. There's nothing you can do. I mean, the backstop is a concept, and the concept is this is an insurance policy, and this is what happens when all the other stuff doesn't work. You don't come up with insurance policies that end after a certain period of time, or that one side can put out of whenever they are. She is not going to get this thing. So one of the things that's very troubling about what she's doing right now is it's like, well, fine, we're not going to have the deal. I'm going to go off over here. There is no plan A, because there's nothing that she's going to be able to achieve over there, or that she even really suggests with her own words is likely to achieve it. And there doesn't seem to be any plan B. So one can only conclude that what she really intends to do is to just wind down the clock. We get closer and closer to that panic moment of March 29th. Markets panic, MPs get the deal, and then they'll just have to go for hers, because the alternative is rather bleak indeed.
But rather reasonably, could she not be also in a position where she can return to the House and say, you asked me to go and have a look, I went to speak to the European leaders, literally this is the best deal, and so we have to agree to it.
But then that's what she was saying last week. I mean, you know, this is an argument that she has already used.
But no, I really mean it.
Right, well, exactly, you know, and that's not a great look for a country that's, you know, really facing a proper change in the core way that it functions. This is simply not good enough. Now, the deal was there, she thought she couldn't get it through, and the only reason it is not in front of MPs right now is not because she believes that she can get some kind of substantial change to it. It's because she knew it was going to be defeated, and once it was defeated, her own position was in danger. And that seems to me to be a very, very dangerous state of affairs indeed.
She's a weakened leader, but Jeremy Corbyn knows that he would not win a motion of no confidence, which is why he's not bringing it, and instead he's having this emergency debate this afternoon.
Exactly. It seems like the Labour plan at the moment is to wait for the moment of maximum impact. They were planning to do it straight after the vote fell. Obviously, that didn't come to pass given the fact it was delayed. And I think the core issue right here is the DUP. Would they back the government in a no confidence vote? It seemed that while we're still in this holding pattern, it seems like the game that they wouldn't. So that's really what they're betting on. I also think that Jeremy Corbyn recognises that Labour's own position certainly doesn't answer any of the unanswered questions of this process, and I think kind of delaying the inevitable in that sense actually plays to him for his own reasons at this point as well.
But no matter how frustrated the DUP is about the Irish backstop, they're never going to support Labour, are they?
No, I think Jeremy Corbyn would lose that vote of no confidence. But nevertheless, something has to change here. If the entire strategy is just to get her deal over by presenting everybody with something that is so appalling that no sane British government would do it, then that is not a tenable state of affairs. So the Labour Party needs to actually take a position. Its position right now, as looking to the front benches, is arguably more insane than that of people like Ian Duncan Smith. Their position is not only that they could go off and negotiate the entirety of a new withdrawal agreement that took Theresa May 2 years, the entirety of an actual trade deal, which we expect to take about another 5 to 7 years, but also, before all of that, have a general election. And their position is that they could do all of that by March. Now, that is an insane idea, and no one with any seriousness thinks that you could do it. So if they can't do that, they need to say, fine, we want to vote of no confidence. And if they can't achieve that, then they need to go to part 3 of what their proposal is and say, fine, we're going to break the deadlock in a way that doesn't involve a general election and does involve another referendum. That is their policy. They now need to pursue it.
We are portraying her as a Prime Minister who's in an impossible position, who has no friends, who has no choice but to wind down the clock, and then she will be out of number 10 before too long. It doesn't look as though that's the case. We were even told, I interviewed Jacob Rees-Mogg just a short time ago, and he gave us the impression that, you know, all these letters to the chair of the 1922 committee, 45 I think is what he needs, 45 or 48, is it 45? I can't remember, I'm looking at John Craig, 46 I'm told. 48, there we go, whichever number you want, permanently 3 from 8. However, the point remains that there aren't enough letters.
No, 100%. I think the only thing that is really keeping Theresa May in place, despite the fact she's a leader whose authority, not just in her own party, but in the country is completely shattered, is the fact that the Tory Brexit opposition to her has proven itself completely incapable of moving against them. And I think actually their incompetence to be able to kind of impose what they see as an alternative has, if anything, not necessarily strengthened her position, but made her just the least weak character in the room at this point.
My trouble with, I guess, is it's quite easy to feel sorry for her, because at least she has got a plan, at least she's been working on it while others carp from the sidelines. Some of the people carping from the sidelines, like Boris Johnson, were in government for 18 months and now act as if they were, had never been there in the first place. So obviously that's hard to stomach. But ultimately, what she has come back with is a deal that reflects her specific red lines. She only really had 2 red lines. End freedom of movement, prevent a border in Ireland. That means you hug the EU close, but also keep them far apart. So she's come up with this contorted Frankenstein's monster that is the product of her priorities. She does own that monster, and she needs to take responsibility for it. And the fact is, there is no one, seemingly in the entire country, who supports the deal that she brought back that doesn't live in Downing Street.
We keep hearing about the Norway agreement. The Norway agreement, the Prime Minister spoke about it actually at the dispatch box just yesterday, would mean a free movement of people. So that goes completely against what you're just suggesting that she
wouldn't be able to do it according to her red lines.
Red lines, yeah.
Well, it's certainly true that it seems like that's one of the deals, Norway or Norway Plus involving a customs union might be something which we'll be able to get through Parliament. But first of all, I think the problem is we've seen leading Norwegian politicians make them. 100%. I think that one of the big problems for Brexit voters at the moment is that May's deal is certainly not what people voted for. I think you'd have to take a very limited view of what Brexit was about to suggest ending free movement but surrendering sovereignty in many other respects was actually what people wanted. But at the same time, it's quite clear that any of the other options on the table are various different flavours of non-Brexit. And I think the big problem we're at the moment is that the country voted something, but our elected representatives in our representative democracy don't represent the split of those views, and that's the insurmountable problem at this point.
I think the thing is, how do you represent it? Because nobody really knows what it is. I mean, it's fine to say that, right? But, nobody voted, for instance, for what we see right now, and yet this is a Brexit outcome. We say no one would vote for Norway, but that is a Brexit outcome. Nobody votes, say, for the customs union, not the single market, but that is a Brexit outcome. When you have a referendum, especially a very tight one, you have lots of people voting for lots of different reasons. Between 20 to 40% of Leave voters say they either don't care about immigration or they're not willing to prioritise it over the economy. Now, where are they being represented? This is a mess that isn't just stemming from politicians. It's stemming from the fact that there is no such thing as the will of the people. People are diverse, they have different priorities, they have different views, sometimes those views change, they have different identities. And politicians can't reflect it properly because, of course, we are completely shattered ourselves. We're a kaleidoscope of views. And that's why we're in such a terrible pickle. And that's why most of the solutions to this, when we talk about general elections, when we talk about referendums, we're saying, look, we need to fundamentally rejig the inputs into where we are so that we can come up with some kind of tenable sort of solution to the problem that we currently find ourselves in.
What are you saying to your readers about second referendums?
I think it's quite clear that the second referendum, particularly on the terms in which it would be posed, because if a second referendum was mooted at any point, I think it's pretty obvious that the choice would be pretty unsatisfactory to many Brexit voters.
What would the question be?
Well, that exactly is the question. First of all, it's unclear that they would ever be able to actually decide on that question, but if it was, I think it's fair to say a lot of discussion is around it would be May's deal versus Remain, and I think for many Brexiteers like myself, that effectively leaves a Brexit option off of the ticket. I think if a second referendum came forward, I think it would leave a lot of people feeling incredibly betrayed. I think it would leave them with a feeling that they were invested with this incredibly important decision and they were told, no, it was too complicated what you wanted, you're going to have to vote again. And I think it would destroy people's faith in democracy in this country for at least a generation. But at the moment, things have been so mismanaged that there's just no way out of this impasse, unfortunately.
I mean, I just don't know. I mean, they're already having their faith in democracy shattered by the fact that this is a stalemate. Now, I don't see any scenario in which offering people a vote on something can ever be a betrayal of democracy. By definition,
before the first vote is implemented,
I can be more open, I think, to the idea that there might be some need for a sort of no-deal option on that ballot paper somewhere. I don't think that can include citizens' rights, and I do think you need to be open to the fact that we need to do some deals with Europe, even if there's no trade deal. For instance, you need an aviation treaty just to fly there. So you can't legally put on a ballot paper that we will never fly to Europe. You'd have to do something about that. But put those things to one side. As long as citizens' rights are secured and you could do things like aviation, there's no reason why there shouldn't be a no-deal option on that ballot paper. But at some point, we are going to come to a position where we're going to have to look at each other and go, look, there is no solution here. We are in stalemate. And that means that we have to start thinking in some rather radical directions.
Well, I think the big problem is, again, we hear this idea that a second referendum wouldn't be a betrayal of democracy because we're just asking the public again. I think the main distinction we have to make here is the fact that when you take a vote, you expect it to be implemented. When you vote for a government and they gain a majority, you expect them to be able to form that government and forces outside of that control, not stop them from doing it. And I think that a lot of Brexit voters looking at this process, they're effectively seeing arguments for a second referendum being made just because of the mismanagement of how their vote was implemented in the first place. I think asking them to break through this impasse is just a reflection of the fact that their vote wasn't taken seriously, therefore it wasn't implemented properly, and now they're being asked to fix the process by effectively being asked to give the right answer next time. I don't think that's going to wash with them.
I just don't understand. I mean, so you have to have a solution at some point. And you're saying that this deal is not proper Brexit. You said that these are all varieties of not doing Brexit. Saying another referendum would mean that, you know, we're disrespecting the will of the people. So what exactly is the solution?
I think at this point we have to find a way of sort of re-engaging the public on this question without this being a question of just without a Brexit option on the ballot paper. And I think really at this point, the political class is something. I don't know the way through this, but I also don't think we should entertain various anti-democratic options through that.
It sounds a lot like you don't have a plan yourself. And when you say we have to re-engage the public, but without offering them a vote and calling that undemocratic, that just seems like a very strange position to suddenly hold.
I'm just lamenting the fact that we've gotten to this point in the first place where only anti-democratic solutions have seen the way of clearing this blockage.
I mean, I'm sorry that you're upset about it, but nevertheless, what is your proposal for what we do now?
Well, I think me personally, I think that the question right now is that the only option that is even feasible on the table that would actually uphold the Brexit vote insofar as returning sovereignty is a no-deal Brexit. I think it's quite clear that's the only thing that would deliver that. Nevertheless, I think it's quite clear that there is a lot of public anxiety about this question, not least because of the government's inability to actually prepare for this fully. And I think we do need to have a proper debate about what that would entail to prepare for it.
Just to quickly check on, for instance, two of the things that I mentioned. The first one was citizens' rights. A million Brits that live in Europe and 3 million Europeans who live here. Now, their rights will be guaranteed, continued, through the withdrawal agreement. So when you say that you want no deal, you are now saying that you actively want to enter into a situation where we cannot guarantee the rights of 1 million British citizens in the EU.
I'm saying that I think in that situation, I think as should have happened at the beginning of this process, the British government should unilaterally guard the rights of and we would expect them to reciprocate. If they didn't want to reciprocate, then I think that just shows the EU for what they are. That's not necessarily within our gift to do that.
If I move on then to aviation, for instance. Now, we fly to Europe on aviation treaties that are part of the EU. We fly to America using aviation treaties that are part of the EU. You say you want a no deal. What is your solution to making sure that we can still fly to Europe and America?
Those deals have already been done, though, haven't they, by the aviation industry?
No, the aviation industry deals
having
are not
spoken
done.
to contacts at the flag carrier and the like, they've already done those deals.
Everything is in the withdrawal agreement. All of the recognition of America for our flights operating is through EASA, is through an aviation agreement that is part of the EU. Now, without us being members of that, and without anything in the withdrawal agreement for transition, no, there is no legal basis for it. That is fixable, but you need a deal to fix it. So when people say, well, I want no deal, they have to say, what are we going to do about aviation?
Yeah. We all know that we'll be able to fly to the European Union, and we'll also be able to fly to the United States.
You need a deal for that. So if people say, we want no deal, they have to answer exactly how is it that you are going to make sure that that works, because that involves a deal.
Okay. Your response to that, and then we must go.
Exactly. No, I think it's fair to say that when people talk about no deal, they're not just trying to suggest that there would be no side agreements that were made. I think when the question of what the public wants to vote on is the substantive questions of sovereignty, I think all of these side issues are very important, but I think a public would expect the political class to negotiate these things as side options as part of a general departure. I don't think you can put those before the public.
So you do want to do?
Well, of course. There is no deal and there is no deal, but with side deals. I think that's already been well established.
Love it. It's good to talk to both of you guys. Thank you. Please come back and talk to us again soon. I'm sure we'll be here for weeks to come.
It's very cold.
It is very cold, and I appreciate you taking the time out to come and join us. Thank you. Go and have a cup of tea. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.